In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to build a very quick and easy mini album or folio base that you can do with any paper collection. Now, I will be using the Mintay Papers Lighthouse collection later on to decorate, but for now, what I'm going to be doing is going through the base, so starting with the cover and then going through the base pages. Now to start, I've cut 2 pieces of my cardstock to 5.5 by 7.5. I've cut 1 piece to 3 inches by 7.5 and 1 piece to 3 inches by 6.5. Then for my chipboard, I've cut 2 pieces to 4.5 by 6.5 and 1 piece to 1.5 by 6.5. I'll be starting with my 5.5 by 7.5 paper and my 4.5 by 6.5 chipboard. On my papers here, I have measured up 1/2 inch from the bottom edge and I've drawn a line. This is just a guideline basically. So I'm going to apply my adhesive to the back side of this chipboard and then I'm going to place it down here on the center of my cardstock so that I have 1/2 inch around the entire piece. I'm going to do that for both of my 4.5 by 6.5 papers, and then I will come back and show you how to wrap them. Both of your pieces should look like this at this point. We are going to be cutting the corners. Now you can measure 1/8 inch past the corner. You can just eye it and cut it. I have these little spacers that I will be using. So this is 1/8 inch. So I'm just going to place it here and draw a line like this. So I want to make sure that I am keeping enough paper past that corner so that it will wrap that corner in cardstock when I fold it around. Once I have my lines, I'm going to then go ahead and remove that excess paper. So like I said, you don't have to use this. You can just eye it if you feel comfortable eyeing those corners and making sure that you leave enough paper. Now, something that I am going to do, and I like to do just to make sure that my cover has really sharp edges, I'm going to fold, or I'm going to turn over on the back side, and I'm going to use my bone folder right down each side just to get that paper right up against that edge. And I'm going to do this on all 4 sides. Now I'm going to fold over here, or I'm going to flip over here, and I'm going to start bending it up and over my paper, just like this. And now I have that nice crisp edge. I'm going to start on one side. I always start on the smaller sides, but you can start on whatever side you prefer. I'm going to apply my adhesive here, and then I am going to fold this over and burnish it down. Now, once I have this down, you'll see how this paper goes past the edge. Now I'm going to take my bone folder and I'm going to press this paper in just slightly and wrap it around that corner. Then I'm going to come over here to the opposite side and apply my adhesive here and wrap this side up and over. Burnish it down on top, and then I'll take my bone folder again and wrap those corners. Just like that. And then I can take these sides and apply my adhesive, and when I fold this over, that corner is going to be completely wrapped with my paper, so you won't see any of that chipboard. It won't be exposed at all. And then when I'm finished, I'm just going to bring my bone folder here and run it down that edge, just so that this is a nice clean fold here. And now I'll do the same thing with this final side to wrap this first cover here. I'm going to burnish this paper down. And then I'm going to make sure that those corners are nice and smooth and wrapped. So now we have our completely wrapped cover. I'm going to do the same thing on the second one, then we'll come back and work on the spine. Now once I have my two covers, I'm going to set those aside and bring in my 3" by 7.5" piece and my little 1.5 by 6.5 chipboard piece. Just like on the other pieces, I've measured up 1/2 inch from the bottom, and I have a line here in the center for 1.5 inches that I'm going to adhere my chipboard to, so that I have 3/4 inch on both sides and then 1/2 inch on top and bottom. Now once my chipboard is on my cardstock, I'm going to roll over the top and the bottom edges, and I'm going to use my bone folder here. Once it is over the chipboard, I'm going to hold it in place on the chipboard, and then I'm going to take my bone folder and I'm going to crease the paper on the side, and then I'm going to smooth out the end of the paper. Now what this is going to do, it's going to create little tabs or little wings, but you should be able to see here, it's going to be at a very slight downward angle here. I'm going to flip this over and do the same thing on the opposite side first, getting it around the chipboard, and then once it's smooth on the chipboard, I'm going to mold that paper around it and then come right down the end to create those little wings. And now I'm going to take my adhesive on this entire section here. I'm just going to then repeat what I just did with the adhesive on it now to get this to stick down. So I want the center part to be flat first, and then I want to press this paper down and around that chipboard and flat. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the second tab over here. Just like this. Now I have this piece. I'm going to turn it over to the outside, take my bone folder and run my bone folder down that edge to create that crease on both sides. And now I have this piece, and my two cover pieces is ready to be assembled. So I'm going to flip back over, and I am going to use my ruler here as a guide for keeping everything straight. I'm going to take my adhesive here and apply my adhesive to one of these tabs, making sure that I don't accidentally go on top of that spine piece. So I want to go just up to the edge and cover this with my adhesive. Just like this. And now if I use my ruler, I've got this sitting flush against there. I'm going to take my first cover piece and sit it right next to my spine and make sure that everything is nice and flat at the bottom. No gap between the spine and the cover. And then I'm going to press this down. So this method, there's no gap between the pieces. In the wrap method, you are leaving a gap because of the way the cover opens and closes. But this is the lay flat method, and you do not need to have that gap because of how it'll open and close, and I will show you that in just a minute. I'm going to make sure that it's pressed here on the inside as well. Now I'm going to flip this over because it's easier for me to do this with it on the right hand side. And I'm going to add my adhesive to that second tab. Again, making sure that I don't go on top of that spine piece accidentally while I'm putting my adhesive down. But I want to cover this entire tab section. And then I'm going to lay it down. And I'm going to take my second cover and place it here, right next to that spine, making sure that there is no gap and everything is flat at the bottom. That's why I'm using my ruler, so that everything touches the ruler. And then I'll go ahead and burnish this down. I'm going to flip over and burnish from the inside as well. And then here I can take my final piece. It's 3.5 or 3 by 6.5, and it will go here, and it will be the same exact size from here to here, and it'll be the same size top and bottom. Now, if your piece is extended for any reason, it's a little bit larger, just slightly trim this, and we're going to adhere this down to cover that spine. Once I have this piece on, I want to make sure that it is completely dry before I go on to the next step. So I'm going to take my bone folder in these creases, and I'm just going to lift up slightly and carefully fold this over. Then I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, just starting with my bone folder in that crease and then folding that cover over. And this is why you don't need to leave any space between the pieces like you do when you do the wrap method, because the way that this sits, the covers are actually on the outside on those tabs, and then the spine sits there and it is flat. And when you open the book, it will actually end up laying flat too. So I like to work my covers a little bit so that they do lay flat. And when there's stuff inside, they will actually open and lay flat too. So there is the basis for the album. It's a tiny little album because I'm going to be putting it in a little treasure chest that I've already made. But you can do this process with any size chipboard. What I'm going to do next is build up the pieces here, and I'm not doing a traditional album with spine here with pages, but you could, if you wanted to, you would just add your spine here, your hinges here for your spine. I'm going to make it more of a folio where I'm going to have two sides here that I'm going to build up, and then they're going to meet in the middle when the book is closed. I have already made the right side of my little folio. The left side is going to be a mirror image, so we're going to do this one together. I'm going to show you this one first, and then we'll start assembling this side. So I have a piece over here that folds out, and there will be a photo spot here. Then I have this flap that has a pocket here. It flips over this way, room for a photo here. Now this one has some waterfall flaps on it, and it folds down. And then I have a belly band here, it flips up, and then on the base I have a pocket. So I'm using all the different traditional elements in a mini album that you would typically use. So I'm building that into my base here. Now we're going to come over here on this side, and we are going to start with our first piece. It's going to be cut to 5.5 by 6.5. You're going to score this at 1/2 inch and 1 inch on the right hand side. Now I have taken on this 1/2 inch strip to the right, I have mitered the ends here on that strip. Now I'll take my bone folder and I'm going to burnish these folds. And I like to start in the center and work my way outward, holding my paper, that way it doesn't shift and cause these folds to be crooked. And I like to burnish on both sides to really get my folds to be really crisp. Now I'm going to fold back so I just have the 1/2 inch section showing. And I'm going to apply my adhesive along this entire 1/2 inch tab. To line this piece up so that it is in the perfect position, I am going to take my cover and I'm going to fold up so that I know exactly where that spine is going to be, and then I'm going to fold this, and then I'm going to make sure top and bottom that it's lined up okay. And then holding this in place, I'm going to burnish this down. Now I have to be very careful here that I don't have this paper too far into this spine piece, because then it will not fold correctly. I'm going to fold up on this, and you'll see that it mirrors this part here. And when these are closed, they will meet in the center. And I am going to use a tie, some type of closure, to keep this book closed as well. Okay, so I'm going to open this one up and come in with my next piece. It measures 5 5/8 by 6 1/2. I've actually cut this slightly less than 5 5/8. So if you wanted to be really careful, you could cut this to 5 1/2, and you're going to make this piece a little bit shorter so that it doesn't run into this and stick out the side. Now from the left-hand side, I've scored this at 1/2 and 1 1/8 of an inch. That leaves this part a little bit less than 4 1/2 inches. I'm going to use my bone folder to crease both of these folds, and I did miter the ends on that 1/2 inch tab on the end. With this piece here, I'm going to apply my adhesive to this 1/2 inch tab first, and then I'm going to take my booklet here and I am going to set this right on the edge of my book, making sure top and bottom is okay. I'm going to press this in here, then I'm going to hurry up and close this one to make sure that it will close okay. And once it is in position, I'm going to then go ahead and burnish this down. So I need to make sure that it's at the edge of my album, but I also need to make sure that I have that room under here to where this is flat and this page still fits underneath of here. And I don't want it to extend too far over here. That's why I cut it slightly less than the 5 5/8. So when it's in the right position, you'll see just a little bit of this paper here. Now I'm going to open both of these up for the next piece. Oh, I guess I can move this one. It's going to be this pocket here. So I am going to fold this one over like this. And now I've cut this piece to 2 1/2 by 7 1/2. I've scored this at 1/2 and 7 inches on the 7 1/2 inch side. And I've scored it down the right-hand side at 1/2 inch on the 2 1/2 inch side. Now I just cut through the corners here and I mitered these ends to remove all that excess paper so that it doesn't add too much bulk and not lay flat. And I'll take my bone folder and fold down on these score lines to create my pocket. Now I'll add my adhesive to my 1/2 inch tabs, and I am going to just line this pocket up with that right edge of my flap, and then the top and bottom edge as well. So I'm actually going to turn it this way to make it a little bit easier for me to see. And I am going to just set this right on here, making sure it is on that edge, holding it down in the center to keep it flat so that it doesn't pucker. And then I will press this down. Now I'll go ahead and open this up. For my next piece, it's cut 4.5 by 7 1/4. On the 7 1/4 inch side, I've scored it 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch. I've mitered the ends on the 1/2 inch section, and I am going to fold on both of my score lines. Now with this piece here, I need to make sure that it will fit between these folds and not prevent those side flaps from folding up and being straight. And my piece looks okay, so my piece will fit between here. If yours does not, you'll need to trim this slightly so that it will fit. Once I know my piece fits, I'm going to go ahead and apply my adhesive to my 1/2 inch tab section here. And I'm going to place this one right on that bottom edge first. And then I will fold up on that 1/4 inch section and then fold over to make sure everything is lined up okay. And then I'll go ahead and burnish this one down. Now, once this one is on, I'm going to add my waterfall flap. So I need 2 pieces that measure 4.5 by 6. I'm going to score at the top of both pieces at 1/2 inch on the 6 inch side. And then I am going to fold on these score lines to create the 2 waterfall tabs. I'll take my first piece and apply my adhesive here to the 1/2 inch tab. And this one is simple. It's just going to go right at the top edge, and I need to make sure that it is lined up side to side. So if for some reason this piece is larger, you will need to take it to your paper trimmer and trim it slightly. So you want to be very careful when you make your cuts that your papers are the exact size you need. Once this one is on, I'm going to flip up, and then I'll come in here with my second waterfall tab, apply my adhesive, and then I'm going to take this one and I'm going to use this bottom edge of that 1/2 inch tab to line up the top of this flap. And then I need to line up the sides as well. So sometimes the paper might be slightly crooked when it's cut. Some of the Michaels paper actually comes that way. A lot of it actually does. So when you put things on, they don't always line up correctly. But I start with this and then I line up the sides. So the sides are going to be more important than that part is once you have it in the correct position. So now I have my 2 waterfall tabs here. I'm going to flip up or flip down. And then I've got my piece that measures 4.5 by 7. It's scored at 1/2 inch on the top on the 7 inch side. And these tabs here should have mitered ends on them. And then I will burnish that score line. And I'm going to apply my adhesive to my 1/2 inch tab first. And add this one right here to the top of my page. Now I need to make sure that it doesn't interfere with my being able to fold this up. So if your piece is too long and it goes into that fold, you would need to trim it. Mine is just the right size. I checked all my pieces though before I did this. But you can always bring your trimmer in and trim pieces. I've done that sometimes forgetting to check, and I'll just bring my paper trimmer in and trim slightly, or you could draw a line and you could use your scissors too. Once this piece is on, I've got my next piece that measures 2 inches by 7.5. This is scored at 1/2 inch and 7 inches on the 7.5 inch side. Both of these pieces have mitered ends. And I am going to fold on those score lines. Once I have my belly band, I am going to bring my ruler in here and I'm going to set my ruler down just so that I can make sure that I put this on the center. I'm going to apply my adhesive to my little 1/2-inch tabs on my belly band. And then I'm going to set this right down the center of my page. Once I have it there on the top, I'm going to bring it down here at the bottom just to make sure it is straight. And then again, holding in the middle, I'm going to use my bone folder to keep this nice and flat and then burnish this down. Then I'm going to flip this up, and my last piece is 5.5 by 3 inches. On the 5.5-inch side, I've scored 1/2 and 5. Then I've turned it, and across the bottom on the 3-inch side, I've scored it 1/2 inch. I've mitered the ends and cut through those corners to take out that excess paper. And then I'm going to fold on my score lines to create my pocket. Now this pocket, you do want to make sure will fit in here between your flaps. So you need to make sure that both of those flaps will close appropriately, because if it's too large and pushes out on either side, your album will not properly close. So once you have your pocket ready to go, you're going to apply your adhesive to that 1/2-inch tab on all 3. And then take your pocket and use these score lines across the bottom and the sides to place your pocket correctly, making sure that you are above that lower score line down here on the bottom so that it doesn't fold incorrectly. And now I'm just going to use my bone folder to make sure that it is burnished down. So now we've got our pocket, our belly band, our waterfall flaps, our pocket here, and our final flap. And so this is the base build of our album, and when it closes, right now it's going to be a tight close or a tight fit here because they're just up against my spines here, so you'll see that. But whenever everything is together, it will, these pieces will be held together too. So these will not gap like they are now, but you might feel like it's falling apart because the way that the album is built. But that will actually help it whenever I go to open it, it will actually lay much flatter. So this is my base build. And at this point, if you are not using the Lighthouse papers like I am, you can go ahead and use your own papers. But if you want to follow along with me, I have another tutorial video where I'm going to go through the Lighthouse papers, and I'm going to give you measurements and show you what papers I'm using. And I'm going to add some inserts and different things too. And even if you're not using the Lighthouse paper and you just want to have the measurements for the papers or some ideas about the inserts and things that I'm using and how I'm putting ribbons or magnets or whatever else I decide to use in here, feel free to jump into that tutorial to follow along even with your own paper collection. So I hope you will join me in that tutorial. And if you have any questions about the build for this one, please feel free to leave me a comment. If you are interested in purchasing the spacer that I had at the beginning of the tutorial, it comes in a 2-piece set. I will link that in the description box below as well. And then this little album here, I've actually designed to go into my little treasure chest here. So this treasure chest is made out of MDF. It comes unassembled. If you are interested in purchasing one of these, I will also link that in the description box below. Now this book was designed so that it will fit into that treasure chest. So that's why it is relatively small. So I hope you will join me in the next tutorial. And again, check out those links in the description box if you're interested in purchasing any of these products that I've been using today. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.